6 in Boston. Warriors, Celtics, and you knew, Big Perk, that the Celtics were going to hit him with a punch early, and they did, going up 14-2.
They did, Greeny, and they got the lead by ball movement, player movement, and I thought they went away from it, but that's how they got the lead. You thought the Celtics were about to blow away with this game.
14-2 was the early lead, but then everything turned in a big way late in the first quarter, Monica.
Oh, there goes that man. Steph Curry got cooking, and you already knew what time it was. He continues to talk about championship DNA, and it showed up big time.
They were knocking down shots. Jordan Poole knocking it down. It was a 19-0 Warriors run. At that point, it turns into a 21-0 run.
Oh, I don't know if we're talking about this defense enough, because the Warriors put the straps on and they locked down this Celtics team that got incredibly stagnant. Look at Steph celebrate.
Longest scoring run in a finals game over the last 50 years, and they did a lot of it with Steph on the bench. But when he was on the floor, he was unstoppable, taking it to the hole a lot last night, Big Perk.
Absolutely. We know him as the greatest shooter to ever touch the basketball, but he's one of the most skilled players to ever touch the basketball.
Here's some of that shooting again. In this stretch, in the third quarter, every time the Celtics sort of threatened to make it a game, Steph found a way, especially with this one run in the third quarter that really put things away for good.
I got nothing, Greeny. Like, it was a sight to behold. It was incredible to be in the arena. This one, I was like, oh, come on, man.
All right, he felt the same way. Look at him. He's pointing it. He knows what time it is. It's time for a 4th championship ring on those 5 fingers of his hand. Celtics would not give up. Jaylen Brown was valiant last night.
Yes, he talked his talk and he backed it up, Greeny. He went down swinging.
They would get it within 8 at one stretch or one point in that fourth quarter as Horford would knock it down. He had a good game last night. But it was, to your point, Monica, that Golden State defense that winds up sealing the deal.
Swarming. I mean, anytime Jason Tatum got into that paint, there was a second defender. You get out in transition, you make it look, so easy.
Yeah, that was a walk on Draymond, but what does make it? And then on they go again. It's Steph getting to the hole. The Warriors' lead is 12, and he knows it. He said, we just put them to bed. And that's the 3 that really closes the deal in the final 3 minutes. He knows it. Night is exactly right. Steph Curry, an absolutely spectacular finish, and he was emotional at the end. Jason Tatum, there'll be better nights for that man, but for this trio, it is 4 championships in the last 8 years. The Warriors are the champions of the basketball world, and when it was over, Steph, emotional with our Lisa Salters.
Man, I'm so proud of our group. I thank God every day that I get to play this game at the highest level with some amazing people. I mean, we do know this is what it's all about, playing for a championship and what we've been through the last 3 years. The beginning of the season, nobody thought we'd be here, except everybody on this court right now. It's amazing. It's very surreal, though, very surreal.
He was in tears before it was even over, and here's one of the reasons why. When you look at the great trios in basketball history, this puts them above in terms of titles, not necessarily in terms of historical significance. Even Jordan, Pippen, and Rodman, the 3 Hall of Famers, and you see some of the other legends on your screen. They are now equal to that group from San Antonio in more recent years, and who knows, maybe they're just getting started. So there's so many different places we can go here, but Big Perk, let me start quickly with you as one who played in the league and played so recently. How do we put into words what we just saw from Steph Curry in a series in which it was not clear his was the better team? In fact, I would argue the Celtics were the better team, but Steph Curry continuously found ways to do it.
You know what? When you talk about Steph Curry and the way that he did it, Greeny, Monica, I mean, we're talking about putting him at a different table. We're talking about putting him at the table with Jordan, LeBron, Kobe, Magic, Bird. He's sitting there and he's having a filet mignon too. And he wants the creme brulee too as well. Here's the thing about Steph Curry. He just cemented himself as a top 10 all-time greatest player to ever play the game of basketball, Greeny. This finals, the way that he did individually was one of the greatest finals performances by individuals that I've ever seen.
I agree. Look, I mean, he wasn't the MVP the first time, and that was a LeBron team that was missing its 2 other stars in Kyrie and Kevin Love. And Wendy, I'll bring it to you on this thought. The other 2 titles they won were the Kevin Durant years, and there's always going to be something of an asterisk, figuratively speaking, of course, that hovers over those. This one cements it for Steph. Wendy, pick it up from there.
Yeah, and I think that's what they were feeling. I've been there for all 4 of these titles. I've never seen them savor the moment like they did last night. They didn't stay on the court and celebrate at Oracle Arena as long as they did last night. They hung around for like over an hour. They wanted all the photos. They wanted to savor it with their families. They wanted to dance. It had nothing to do with the Celtics. It was about their moment. And I think that's what you were saying, Greeny. When Draymond and the other players were screaming after the game ended, what can they say now? I think at first I was like, well, that's what all title teams say. They say all the haters, all the doubters, etc. But then I started to realize as they were sort of bonding together and celebrating the moment, even within them, the 2015 title could be talked about. The 2017 and 18 titles because of Durant could be talked about. They've lived with the scar of the 3-1 loss for so long. And that was about checking off all those boxes, saying that they didn't need Durant, that they didn't need to have injuries, that the 3-1 loss wasn't what was going to be defining for them. I would argue that that didn't need to be said. I would argue that they were already an all-time team and that Steph was an all-time player. But their reactions said that. And to me, I learned a lot. I didn't think I could learn more about this team. As I watched them embrace this title last night, I learned about them. And I think that's going to be one of the lasting images, is what it actually meant to them for it being a fourth title.
Monica, how about it? How about Steph? How about the history of it here?
It's incredible. And I think how this group had to do it, the way Steph had to flat out carry the squad. You guys, if he doesn't put up 43 points, the pivotal game in this series, we would all agree, is game 4. We don't know if it plays out this way. And so I just think the tremendous gratitude from the collective. We've seen Clay get a little weepy or very thoughtful as he talked about the time that he missed with his injury. But even Steph, when he talks about this one hitting different, I asked him about that as we got ready for games, and he just talked about the confidence that the role players had, the way that Draymond and Clay could get back on the floor, and it was like they hadn't missed a beat. And so I just think there's such a tremendous amount of gratitude, because I don't know if we remember this, but they weren't even in the bubble. Like, they were not good enough to be there, and here they are.
They had the worst record in the NBA what is now 3 seasons ago. 2 seasons ago, they wound up losing out in the play-in tournament, and now here they are, NBA champions. And here's something you never thought you would hear us say. How about the defense that Steph Curry played, particularly last night? Jalen was harping on that in our post-game show last night, that they were hunting him out, and he was ready for the challenge. He was great on both ends of the floor last night.
Absolutely. And Greeny, what we don't give him enough credit for is being one of the best conditioned athletes of all time. We talk about LeBron James because we know the story and we hear about him spending $2 million on his body. But in order for Steph Curry to do what he did throughout this series and this postseason, being able to be effective offensively, moving without the ball, and then defensively, accepting the challenge against bigger players. You know what, Greeny, Monica? It speaks to the culture as well of the Warriors, which one could argue and say they might have the greatest culture of all time. When you start from the bottom and you look up, you look at Draymond Green, a second-round pick. Yes, Steph and Clay went lottery, but they built it up from the ground surface. And it's almost like a plug and replace. You look at Andrew Wiggins, a guy that people gave up on, doubted because he was the number 1 pick, came in and looked like a version of Scottie Pippen in the finals
He did.
Right, and then all of a sudden, Gary Payton II, who played a lot of great minutes and meaningful minutes in the finals, a guy that was on a non-guaranteed contract when he walked into training camp. This is the culture, one of the greatest cultures of all time, and Steph Curry has embodied that. He don't talk a lot, but his leadership goes unnoticed.
Let's talk about that, Wendy, for a moment here. I think that's a really important point that we're making as we consider whether or not the word dynasty is appropriate for this group, and that's a debate I have a feeling we'll be having all summer, and all of us define that somewhat differently. But it will be defined, first and foremost, by Steph. They have an all-time great player. These will be Steph's teams as we remember them. But they will also be defined by this culture, by their resiliency, by not being a group anyone expected. If anyone had told you when you watched Draymond Green play at Michigan State that he was going to turn into a Hall of Fame player, you would have laughed them out of a room. This is a group that has really done it a very different way than most of the other historically great teams, Wendy, that we have seen.
Yeah, and I think typically we don't see a team win a 4th title and we have a different opinion of them. Typically, when we saw the Bulls, when we saw the Spurs, when we saw, the Lakers, with Kobe, we kind of knew who they were. This team showed us a different side of them, even though it was a lot of the same players. And one of the things that I will take away from this is Steph would admit to you he didn't play his best in the finals in the past. He was not a dog. He had a lot of great games, but he didn't put his best foot forward. And had he not put his best foot forward in this series, they don't win. He bought them time to get better. If you look at the back, Draymond got way better. Klay Thompson got way better. Gary Payton Jr. got his feet underneath him and got better. I would even argue that Steve Kerr, his lineups early in the series weren't working out. He made a lineup adjustment, figured out how to do it. He got better. And so it was really Curry playing a role of sort of all-encompassing star that he had not played before. We'd seen him play it many times in regular season games and other playoff series. We'd never seen it at this level. And so, in a way, even though they had to deal with some adversity, the way it played out was a perfect opportunity for him to satisfy not only the doubters, but to satisfy himself. Because he was proud of himself. I know that in the moment he was saying, now you have nothing to say, but I got to believe deep inside he was extremely proud of the way he performed under this pressure.
Look, you make an incredibly important point. Let's live in that for a moment here.